Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive, ready to jump into another fascinating world.
Always.
Awesome. So today, we're going behind the scenes of international relations, like where personal relationships might be a bigger factor than anyone realizes. We're talking a current U.S. president, a Russian leader known for being, well, assertive, and a Ukrainian president stuck in a really, really complex situation. What we want to explore is how much do personal connections between these guys actually affect global events?
Yeah, it's a question that forces you to kind of look past the official stuff, the press releases and all that, like maybe private talks and just how these guys get along. That personal stuff is swaying decisions with global consequences.
Totally. Imagine like a political expert, someone who's been around the block a few times, watching Trump and Putin, right? This expert is, well, let's just say skeptical. They're watching these two leaders getting chummy closer and closer, even while Ukraine and their President Zelenskyy are dealing with a ton of conflict. They're also noticing that Trump seems to prefer talking to Putin rather than Zelenskyy, even opting for meetings with, say, the King of Jordan instead.
Huh. Yeah, that preference, that apparent preference, brings up some interesting questions about Trump's, goals and priorities. Is this like a deliberate move? Personal preference, something else entirely? I think we need to consider the bigger picture here, the historical context, and what these choices could mean.
Okay, so get this. Our expert actually predicted that Trump and Putin would start talking more, before it became public. It's almost like they had this, instinct that something was up behind the scenes.
Wow, that's pretty insightful. Suggests they know these guys and what they might be up to really well. I think it highlights the importance of picking up on those subtle signs, the stuff that most people wouldn't even notice.
Exactly. And our expert goes even further. They think this communication, it's not just practical stuff or business deals or whatever. They see a genuine personal connection, maybe even admiration between Trump and Putin.
Wow, that's a whole other level, right? Like, if personal feelings are influencing decisions at this level, then our typical understanding of diplomacy and global politics is, it's out the window.
Then, boom, a Gulfstream jet pops up in Moscow. Now, this isn't just any jet. It's owned by a company tied to Stephen Witkoff. He's the guy who handles Trump's business in the Middle East. And guess what? That same jet. Trump used it during the election the year before, supposedly because of some security concerns, alleged threats from Iran, the whole 9 yards.
Whoa, that jet in Moscow that's really interesting, especially knowing it's tied to Trump. It makes you wonder what that visit was all about. Could it be about those backroom negotiations or those secret talks everyone whispers about? That could change everything.
Now, our expert, they're not jumping to conclusions saying Trump's in Moscow case closed, but they do think this jet is a pretty strong clue that something's going on. Diplomacy in the shadows, moves and agreements that might come out later. It's like we have a puzzle, some pieces are missing, and this jet, it's a big piece.
I agree, yeah. It shows how important it is to look deeper beyond what we're being told. There could be agendas we don't know about, secret deals, who knows? We have to ask, what's really going on here? What are the motives and what could happen because of this?
Right. And one piece of this puzzle might be Kurt Volker. He's the special representative for Ukraine and Russia. But there's this buzz that he might be replaced by Stephen Witkoff, the jet guy.
Oh, wow. If that happens, that switch, it could mean the U.S. is changing its approach to Russia, like maybe moving to a softer stance. Some people in Trump's team, they've been pushing for easing tensions for a while now.
Yeah, the commentator thinks Volker might be, too tough on Russia, not in line with those in the administration who want to chill things out with Putin, détente, as they call it. This whole internal battle in the U.S. government over Russia, that could have huge consequences for everyone.
Détente, yeah, it's basically like hitting the brakes on tension, something the U.S. and the Soviets did back in the day. But it's a tough dance, lots of compromises. What it would mean for Ukraine and other countries in the area, that's a whole other can of worms.
And speaking of consequences, our expert thinks this possible shift toward détente, well, it could mean the sanctions on Russia get lifted, Putin gets back into the G20, a whole bunch of diplomatic musical chairs, basically. It's like they're setting up a new world order behind closed doors, and the stakes, they're sky high.
The G20, right, that group of the 20 biggest economies, it's kind of a big deal when it comes to how the world works. When they kicked Putin out after he took Crimea, that was a big slap in the face. If he gets back in, that's a huge shift. The whole world looking at Russia differently, maybe the balance of power changes globally, who knows?
Then, out of nowhere, Paul Whelan is released. He's a former U.S. Marine, convicted in Russia, imprisoned, the whole thing. And suddenly, he's free. No one saw that coming, especially since the previous administration, Biden's, well, they didn't really get anywhere trying to get him out.
Wow, that's a twist. Whelan's release, it really makes you wonder, did personal connections play a part in this? Did Trump manage to, I don't know, use his relationship with Putin to pull this off, something official diplomacy couldn't? It's a stark contrast to how the last guys handled things.
The commentator seems to think so. Like maybe Trump's good vibes with Putin, that was the key to getting Whelan out. It really reinforces the idea that sometimes you need that personal touch to get things moving, especially when the official channels just hit a wall.
It's a compelling argument, really highlights how powerful individual relationships can be, even in the most sensitive situations, international diplomacy and all that. Makes you think, right? How much do personal connections matter versus all the official processes and institutions?
And get this, just to make things even more interesting, Trump's been hinting that another American who's being held might be released soon. And he's directly saying it's because of his relationship with Putin.
If that's true, it really shows how much personal diplomacy is at play here. It also makes you question why these people are being released. Is this part of some bigger strategy or just a show of force, look what I can do kind of thing?
Meanwhile, Zelenskyy, he seems to be having a tough time figuring out where he stands in this whole changing world. He keeps saying how important it is to partner with the U.S., but it's becoming clearer and clearer that the West, especially America, is rethinking their relationship with Russia.
Zelensky's in a tough spot, no doubt. He's got to keep a strong bond with the U.S., but he also has to recognize that the U.S. and Russia, well, things are changing between them. Him constantly saying they need the U.S., it might make him look out of touch, especially if the U.S. is actually getting ready to make nice with Russia, even if it hurts Ukraine.
And, our commentator, they're not exactly impressed with Zelenskyy's strategy. They think his actions and statements are kind of disconnected from what's really happening. They argue that he's so focused on getting support from the U.S. that he's not seeing the bigger picture, that the U.S. might be okay with making deals with Russia, even if it means throwing Ukraine under the bus.
Ouch, yeah, so that criticism makes you wonder about his leadership skills, how well he can adapt when the world is changing so fast. Maybe he's holding on to a strategy that doesn't work anymore, which could be dangerous for Ukraine down the line.
Here's another thing that stuck with me. The commentator thinks the U.S. finance minister's recent visit to Ukraine wasn't a good thing, not a sign of support at all. They think it was more about the U.S. checking up on their aid money and maybe even getting ready to seize Ukrainian assets.
Whoa, that's a pretty cynical take, but it does reflect a bigger concern about why the U.S. gives aid to Ukraine in the first place. Are they really trying to help, or is it more about pushing their own agenda, maybe something to do with U.S. politics or their big global strategies? This is definitely something that needs a closer look.
And to top it all off, the commentator directs their criticism at the people of Ukraine themselves. They're basically saying they're not doing enough in response to all these global shifts, questioning their bravery and commitment in the face of this changing world.
Yikes, that's harsh. But I think it shows how frustrated they are with what they see as, apathy or even resignation. They're basically saying, hey, wake up, things are changing, and you need to be ready.
Yeah, strong words, and I'm sure not everyone's going to be happy about it. Some might see it as a much-needed call to action. Others, well, they might be offended. It definitely makes you think about the role of regular people, everyday citizens, in navigating all this complex international stuff.
Yeah, it's a tough question. On one hand, people and communities have the power to shape their own destinies. On the other, there are these massive forces, these power imbalances on the world stage that can be really hard to overcome.
For sure, it's not about blaming people for their situation. It's more about making them aware of what's going on, encouraging them to find ways to have their voices heard, even when it feels impossible.
Right, exactly. It's about recognizing that even in a world controlled by powerful countries and institutions, individuals and communities still have a say in their own futures. It's not always going to be easy, but it's crucial to remember we're not just watching this global drama unfold, we're part of it.
So true. And that's especially important now when it feels like things are out of control and we're all just passengers. It's a good reminder that even if we can't control what governments and world leaders do, we can choose how we react, how we get involved, and how we help shape the world around us.
Couldn't agree more. It's about realizing we have a choice, even when the odds are stacked against us. Choosing hope over despair, action over apathy, getting involved instead of giving up. It's about believing that even small acts of courage and kindness can matter in a world that can feel so cynical and selfish.
Well said. I think that gets to the core of what this Deep Days is all about. It's not just about understanding this complicated dance of global politics. It's about understanding ourselves, our role in all of this, and how we can impact the future.
Exactly. It's about connecting the dots, seeing the bigger picture, understanding that we're all part of this web of relationships, events, and choices. It's about recognizing that what happens on a personal level can have huge political consequences, and that even events that seem far away can have a real impact on our lives.
And it's about realizing that we're not just watching this global drama unfold. We're characters in it, and we can choose what role we play. We can choose to be informed, to engage, to care. We can choose to stand up for what we believe in, even when it's hard. We can choose to make a difference, no matter how small.
That's powerful stuff. I think it's something we all need to hear, especially now when things feel so uncertain and gloomy. It's a reminder that even in a world like this, there's still room for hope, for taking action, for making things better.
Absolutely. As critical and controversial as our commentator is, they do remind us that we can't just sit back and do nothing. We have to be aware, we have to get involved, and we have to be willing to challenge the way things are.
I'm with you on that. Doing nothing, that's how things get worse. We can't just watch as the world changes around us. We have to get involved, actively create the future we want, even if it means taking risks, questioning authority, and speaking truth to power.
Well said. It's a call to action, and I hope people are listening and ready to answer it. Because at the end of the day, the future isn't something that just happens to us. We create it.
That's the perfect way to put it. The future isn't set in stone. It's like a blank canvas waiting for us to paint our hopes, our dreams, our vision onto it.
That's a message everyone needs to hear. So to everyone listening, I say this: don't be afraid to dream big, to think critically, and to act boldly. The world needs your passion, your creativity, your dedication.
I couldn't agree more. Let's face the challenges ahead with courage, with compassion, with a strong will to make the world a better place for ourselves and for everyone who comes after us.
And remember, we're not alone in this. Let's support each other, learn from each other, and inspire each other to build a future worth fighting for.
Beautiful. I think that sums up what we're trying to do here. It's about creating a sense of community, working together, and recognizing that we all have a responsibility for the future of our planet and our species.
Well said. And on that note, a huge thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the murky world of global power plays and how personal relationships shape everything. I hope it's been enlightening, something to think about, and maybe even a little bit eye-opening.
It's been great exploring these complicated issues with you, and I really hope this conversation has sparked some important questions and reflections for everyone listening.
And remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to learn, to explore, to talk about.
You got it. The journey of discovery never ends. So stay curious, keep asking questions, and never stop learning.
Well said. All right, until next time, keep those minds active and those questions coming.
And don't forget, we're all in this together. Let's keep learning, growing, and working towards a better future.
That's the perfect way to end things. Thanks again for being here on The Deep Dive.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like all these seemingly random events, the jet, Volker maybe getting replaced, the talk about detente, they all start to connect when you look at it from the commentator's point of view. It's like they're all pointing toward this potential shift between the U.S. and Russia.
Right. And what's even crazier is the commentator thinking that these changes are happening partly because of personal relationships. So it's not just about like national interests or disagreements over policies. It's about how individual like Trump and Putin get along. Their personal chemistry.
That's what makes this whole thing so fascinating. We usually analyze the stuff, global relations, through these big abstract ideas like national interest or ideology. But we forget that individual personalities and how people connect, it matters. Especially when you've got leaders who do things their own way and don't always play by the traditional diplomatic rules.
And then there's Zelenskyy. Our commentator's pretty skeptical about his ability to handle this whole new situation. They see him holding on tight to this idea of a strong partnership with the U.S., like he's not even considering that the U.S. might be ready to make a deal with Russia that leaves Ukraine out in the cold.
Yeah, that's a tough assessment, but it raises a good question. Does Zelenskyy just not see the signs from the U.S., or is he trying to project this image of unwavering U.S. support, even though things are changing behind the scenes?
The commentator seems to think Zelensky's just not getting it, and they're especially critical of him constantly emphasizing this U.S. partnership, even as it becomes more and more obvious that the U.S. might be changing its tune on Russia. They see his actions, his words, as out of sync with reality, and that could put Ukraine in a really bad spot.
It highlights how crucial it is for leaders to be adaptable, to think strategically in this global arena. The landscape changes constantly, and leaders have to be able to change their strategies, even their alliances, to deal with new challenges and opportunities.
Absolutely. And speaking of changing landscapes, the commentator has a really interesting take on the U.S. finance minister's recent visit to Ukraine. They see it as a slap in the face, not a show of support. They think it was more about the U.S. checking up on their aid money, maybe even getting ready to seize Ukrainian assets, rather than genuinely offering help.
It's a pretty cynical view, but it does make you think about the motivations behind U.S. foreign aid in general. Is it actually altruistic, or is it often used as a way to push U.S. interests, even if it means hurting the countries they're supposedly helping?
In this case, the commentator seems to believe it's the latter. They see the U.S. using its financial power to pressure Ukraine, maybe as part of this bigger strategy to keep Russia happy. It's a pretty disturbing thought, and it raises some serious questions about the ethics of international aid and how power dynamics play out between nations.
No doubt about it, we need to be looking closely at the motivations behind these actions and making sure that aid is actually meant to help people and not being used as a tool for political manipulation or economic exploitation. Transparency and accountability are so important, both from the countries giving the aid and the governments receiving it.
And then, well, the commentator takes aim at the Ukrainian people themselves. They're critical of what they see as a lack of response to all these global shifts. They question their courage and commitment as the world order changes around them. It's a pretty bleak assessment of their ability to control their own fate.
Yeah, it's a harsh critique, but I think it shows how frustrated they are with what they perceive as complacency or maybe even resignation. It's like they're challenging the Ukrainian people to wake up and see the potential danger, to take a more active role in shaping their future.
It's a powerful message, for sure, but I can see it varying mixed reactions. Some people might see it as a necessary wake-up call, while others might find it offensive or insensitive. It definitely brings up some tough questions about the role of individuals and societies in navigating the complexities of global politics.
It's a delicate balance, that's for sure. On one hand, we have to acknowledge that individuals and communities have the power to shape their own destinies. But on the other hand, we can't ignore the constraints imposed by powerful external forces and the reality that power isn't distributed equally in the international system.
Exactly. It's not about blaming individuals or societies for their circumstances, but about empowering them to be aware of what's going on and encouraging them to find ways to exert their influence even when it feels like an uphill battle.
I couldn't agree more. It's about recognizing that even in a world where powerful states and institutions seem to call all the shots, individuals and communities still have a part to play in shaping their future. It might not be easy, but it's crucial to remember that we're not just passive bystanders in this global drama.
That's such a vital message, especially now when things feel chaotic and out of control. It's a reminder that we might not have direct control over what governments and world leaders do, but we can control how we respond, how we engage, and how we contribute to shaping the world around us.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing our agency, even in the face of overwhelming odds. It's about choosing hope over despair, action over apathy, and engagement over resignation. It's about believing that even small acts of courage and compassion can make a difference in a world that can feel so driven by cynicism and self-interest.
So well said. And I think that brings us to the heart of this deep dive. It's not just about understanding how global politics works. It's about understanding ourselves, where we fit in, and how we can shape what's to come.
Exactly. It's about connecting the dots, seeing the bigger picture, and understanding that we're all connected in this web of relationships, events, and choices. It's about recognizing that personal actions can have political consequences, and that events that seem far away can have a real impact on our lives.
It's about understanding that we're not just watching this play out on a global stage. We're characters in it, and we get to choose our roles. We can choose to be informed, to engage, and to be compassionate. We can choose to stand up for what we believe in, even when it's hard. And we can choose to make a difference, no matter how small.
That's a powerful thought, and it's something we all need to hear. In a world that often feels bleak and uncertain, it's a reminder that there's still room for hope, for action, and for change.
I agree. As critical and controversial as our commentator is, their perspective reminds us that we can't just sit back and watch. We need to stay aware, get involved, and be willing to challenge the way things are.
Could have said it better myself. Complacency is dangerous. It's what allows things to get worse. We have to actively participate in shaping the future we want, even if it means taking risks, questioning those in power, and speaking truth to power.
Well said. It's a call to action, and I really hope people are listening and ready to answer it. Because in the end, we create our own future. It's not something that just happens to us.
That's a great way to put it. The future isn't set in stone. It's a blank canvas for us to fill with our hopes, our dreams, and our vision.
And that's a message worth shouting from the rooftops. So to everyone listening, don't be afraid to dream big, to think critically, and to be bold in your actions. The world needs your passion, your creativity, your dedication.
Absolutely. Let's face the challenges ahead with courage, compassion, and a fierce determination to make the world better for ourselves and future generations.
And remember, we're in this together. Let's support each other, learn from each other, and inspire each other to build a future worth fighting for.
That's a beautiful thought, and it perfectly captures the essence of what we're trying to do here. It's about building a sense of community, a shared purpose, and recognizing that we all share responsibility for the future of our planet and our species.
Well said. And on that note, a huge thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the murky world of global power plays and how personal relationships shape everything. I hope it's been enlightening, something to think about, and maybe even a little bit eye-opening.
It's been great exploring these complicated issues with you, and I really hope this conversation has sparked some important questions and reflections for everyone listening.
And remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to learn, to explore, to talk about.
You got it. The journey of discovery never ends. So stay curious, keep asking questions, and never stop learning.
Well said. All right, until next time, keep those minds active and those questions coming.
And don't forget, we're all in this together. Let's keep learning, growing, and working towards a better future.
That's the perfect way to end things. Thanks again for being here on The Deep Dive. It's like peeling back layers, right? We see these connections between personal relationships, all the political maneuvering, global events, the whole shebang. We started by asking, how much do personal dynamics really affect global politics? And honestly, the answer seems way more complicated than we thought.
Yeah, I mean, it shows how important it is to look beyond the official stuff, those carefully worded statements and diplomatic dances. What we've been talking about, it suggests that those backroom deals, personal connections, maybe even grudges, they could be shaping decisions that have massive consequences.
Our commentator, they're pretty convinced of that, and they've given us a lot to chew on, that's for sure. Their take on Zelenskyy not being able to handle things, thinking the U.S. finance minister's visit was a diss, and that whole criticism of the Ukrainian people, well, it's all pretty thought-provoking.
Yeah, but we got to remember this is just one perspective, and it's definitely a strong one, even a little controversial. But I think it pushes us to think critically, to question the assumptions we often make about how the world works, those international relations, who really has the power, how are these decisions made, what's driving these people on the world stage.
It also shows how important it is to pay attention to the little things, those subtle hints, those unspoken dynamics that often drive events behind the scenes. It's like a detective story. Got to piece together the clues, connect the dots, and draw our own conclusions.
Exactly. And just like a good mystery, there could be multiple interpretations, different ways to see things. The important thing is that we engage with the information, ask those tough questions, and challenge ourselves to see the world from different angles.
This deep dive has definitely been a lot to process. I hope it's gotten everyone listening to think more deeply about what's shaping the world around them.
I hope so too. It's easy to feel lost and confused with all the complexities of international relations, but the truth is, we all have a part to play in shaping the future. Whether it's staying informed, talking about these issues with each other, or pushing for change, our actions do matter.
Well said. And with that, a huge thank you to everyone for diving deep with us into this murky world of global power plays and how those personal relationships affect everything. I hope you found it insightful, thought-provoking, and maybe even a little bit unnerving.
It's been a pleasure exploring these complex issues with you. I always appreciate the chance to dig into these topics and hopefully spark some important questions and reflections.
Remember, folks, the quest for knowledge never ends. So stay curious, keep questioning, and never stop learning.
Couldn't agree more. And remember, we're all in this together. So let's keep learning, keep growing, and keep working towards a better future.
That's the perfect way to wrap things up. Thanks again for joining us on The Deep Dive. Subscribe to our podcast, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We are here to make things clear.